Hey there folks, it's Saul with yet another video and yet more 8.3 coverage. We just got a bunch of announcements today, including lore stuff, including allied race stuff, and today I'm going to be covering the 7 new essences that are coming in patch 8.3. My reactions here are going to be pretty fresh. These are very early impressions of what's going on. All this stuff is subject to change, but so far, a bunch of these essences that are coming, they look fairly interesting. So, well, let's just dive in and see what we've got. There's only one essence coming in this patch that is going to be considered universal, as in any spec can use this, and it's called the Formless Void. Let me read the tooltip. It will replicate the energy in your target's Heart of Azeroth, gaining access to rank 3 of their currently slotted major essence for the next 15 seconds. The Formless Void will go on cooldown for 30% longer than the base cooldown of the essence you replicated, and this does not work on passive essences. As for the Minder power, each time any ally within 40 yards uses an Azerite essence, you will gain a certain amount of your primary stat and haste for 20 seconds. The ally who used that particular essence around you will also gain haste for 20 seconds. So there's a lot going on here, but this Formless Void, it basically lets you temporarily steal other people's Azerite traits, and it'll let you use them regardless of what your spec is. So the popular one of the really popular essences is the Essence of the Focusing Iris, the big beam that does crap tons of AoE damage. As you can see that this has a 1.5 minute cooldown, so what's basically going to happen is that I, as a tank, I can use the Formless Void on a DPS who happens to have the Essence of the Focusing Iris equipped, and then for the next 15 seconds, I have access to that ability, and I can use it to its full potential. The thing is, the Formless Void will then have, I guess, a 30% longer, so that's going to equate to roughly about a 2-minute cooldown for my version of the Essence of the Focusing Iris. So I think that's really cool. I could basically steal, like I said, I could steal an essence and use it. I can't use passives, but I guess that's not really that big of a deal. Stealing the Vision of Perfection isn't what I would consider to be like very useful. So I can see a lot of utility that comes from this. I can see the potential for multiple classes or multiple players picking up this essence for the purpose of being able to do massive AoE damage, or even massive healing or massive damage reduction. So lots of potential with this one, but of course this takes up your major slot. If you have this, you can't use anything else. As for the Minder power, at least as a first impression, this seems like it'll be pretty darn overpowered if you are in a very large group. It'll pretty much mean you'll have full uptime. The one thing I'm not sure about with this essence is if it stacks. If you have multiple people who are using the essences around you, is this buff going to get even bigger? Not too sure. If it only stacks one time, then I would consider this as a kind of equivalent to the World Vein Essence, although it's a little bit less because the World Vein Essence shards, they can stack a little bit higher. Overall though, I think this is a pretty fun essence. You can see on the tooltip here it says something about corruption being reduced by 10. At the moment, have no idea what that means. Alright, so let's move on to the spec-specific essences, starting with tanking, since that's what I'm most familiar with. Strength of the Warden will let you taunt all enemies. This has a 2-minute cooldown, by the way. You basically get a taunt, and for 6 seconds you have a 15% dodge chance. Targets affected by this essence also take 50% additional damage from you. As for the Minder power, it looks like every 2 seconds it's going to store a certain amount of healing until you get to about it looks like 10% of your maximum life. And if I happen to dodge or parry an attack, all of that stored healing will come back to me. This essence has the potential to be a really strong tank DPS cooldown, especially if you're rolling as a class that has really high burst, which is basically not a paladin. Defensively, this seems to again be great for Mythic Plus, in case you happen to lose control of mobs that are around you, if your teammates are doing really crazy burst DPS, or if the affix isn't very friendly for you. As for the Minder power, it's a nice passive heal, and especially with my particular playstyle, I'm a weird one. I like having like lots of bubbles and self-healing and things like that. I don't really care about the damage that I do, I just love being able to stay alive and otherwise self-heal myself like a maniac. So something like this, coupled with the Nullification Dynamo passive or active, can give me it can give me that much more self-healing, which sounds pretty exciting. Oh, and I forgot to add this little bit. The maximum health of all tank specialization players in your party or raid, which should be like 2 or so, is increased by 3, and it stacks. So basically you'll have up to 6% increased maximum life, which is, you know, nice. Not great, but it's nice. Alright, let's move on to Touch of the Everlasting. Your next death is prevented, and you instead regenerate to 40% of your maximum health and take 85% reduced damage for 3 seconds. When your death is prevented, the cooldown of your Guardian of the Ancient Kings is reset, and this does not occur more than once per 10 minutes. As for the passive, when you fall below 35% health, you gain a lot of avoidance for 15 seconds, and your next Shield of the Righteous will last 50% longer. This can only occur once every 1 minute. So this is a nice extra life sort of dealie. Not bad. The fact that it prevents death and also pretty much makes you unkillable for about 3 seconds or so. And then after those 3 seconds are over, you can pop your Guardian of Ancient Kings and then you'll be golden. And then after that, who knows? So as for like the absolutely desperate, everyone's dead except for you kind of moments, even your bubbles is on cooldown. If you're about to get killed, you won't. At least for a little bit, so it's nice. But it's only nice in the sense that you plan for these kinds of deaths or you're otherwise just struggling. The same goes for the minor power. It's great for when things hit the fan in certain situations, but otherwise it's not really helping with normal throughput or normal self-healing or otherwise non-emergency situations. Alright, so let's move on to the healing essences, starting with Unwavering Ward. In this case, you release 12 protective spears outward over 3 in some seconds, granting the first ally to touch it a barrier that absorbs quite a bit of damage for 10 seconds. Each time you send out a protective spear, you gain an absorb shield for 2% of your maximum health. When an ally gains the absorb shield, you and that ally heal for about 3,000. There's also a passive where every 10 seconds, allies within 15 yards gain a shield that absorbs some damage, and it stacks up to what looks like 5 times-ish. Actually, it's 4 times. Sorry about that. And when you have this bubble on, you take 3% reduced damage. So it's a pretty strong passive from a first impression. But let's see how this ability works. So here we go. So I poop out bubbles. And they all have a certain radius around me. If I touch one, actually, I think I might have already have a bubble already, and they fade after about like 10 or so seconds, it looks. So it's interesting, but this kind of takes me back to the old Lightwell situation. If you guys remember, Lightwell was an old bottom row talent for priests way back in the day, where it was dependent on people clicking on the Lightwell in order to take advantage of the benefits. In this case, you just need to walk up to these bubbles in order to get a benefit from them. But given that it's a pretty small benefit, and also from the looks of it, the way that those bubbles were spacing out, it looks like you're kind of moving a long way for it. It's very situational. After taking a second look at the passive, I think the passive is great. It's a huge bit of passive healing, especially for, say, like a Holy Paladin who might be trying to stand close to several people and they happen to have Aura of Mercy. This is a nice little stacking bit that will give them the chance to have a damage absorb bubble. All right, let's see what happens when I'm in a corner and I pop this thing. So here we go. Okay, so things will bunch up like really tight if I get in close like this. And if I run in, it looks like I only get 1 stack of the bubble, but of course, as I said, it will give me a bigger bubble every time I send out each of these small bubbles. Yeah, I'm not too fond about the active ability. The passive, I am much more excited by. The other essence is called Spirit of Preservation. Here you channel a beam of energy onto an ally, healing them for a good bit of healing over 2.5 seconds. Other allies in the beam are healed for a certain amount every 0.5 seconds. Each time Saving Vigil heals the primary target, gain a stack of Devout Spirit, which I have no idea what it is. But here we go with the minor power. Every 5 seconds you gain Saving Vigil, causing your next flash of light to heal for an additional amount, stacking up to 5 times. Each stack of Saving Vigil consumed increases the critical strike chance of your next flash of light within 6 seconds by 20%. So I'm looking at from the view of a Holy Paladin, but I'm sure that it looks like the fast heal from any of the other healing specializations would apply to this minor power. So, okay, so this took me a little bit of time to read, but looking at the minor power first, basically every couple of seconds I gain one of these stacks over here called Devout Spirit. Once it stacks up to 5, that's the maximum amount of stacks, the next time I use a flash of light, which will be like right now, I got a buff for about 5 seconds or so when my next flash of light will have its critical strike chance increased by 100% because of the 5 stacks. So basically what that means as a paladin, for the most part, I'm going to have a very high uptime of having a pretty high crit strike chance of flash of light, which isn't bad if I were to spec myself towards that. The actual Spirit of Preservation heal is a pretty powerful heal. It's just a channeled spell. I tried to move, by the way, earlier, and it does in fact cancel the effect. So you do need to be staying still for the most part. But once that goes off, you're going to instantly have 5 stacks of this Devout Spirit buff. The fact that the beam can hit other allies isn't that big of a deal. Ultimately, it's only a fourth of the healing of the primary target, so it's probably not going to be something that you think about too much. I mean, it'll be nice if everyone is balled up very closely and you can position yourself to be behind everyone so that everyone is between you and the primary target. As a person who likes passive things, just speaking for myself here because I'm just bad at anything but tanking, and even then, well, I like the Unwavering Ward better, mostly because of the passive ability. Now keep in mind, I don't think I mentioned this earlier in the video, but the Heart of Azeroth is going to have 3 slots. Since I'm in the Proving Grounds right now, it's a little bit hard to tell, but I have 1 empty miner slot, and then I have 2 that you can eventually unlock. Most everyone probably has the 2 slots at this point, and the next miner slot is going to unlock at Heart of Azeroth level 80. With that said, I'm going to move on to the DPS essences, which I admit, now I'm probably the least proficient at DPS, but I'm going to try to speak to them anyway. This first one is called the Spark of Inspiration, and I think I'm going to misread some of this. You release a wave of energy from your Heart of Azeroth, increasing the damage of all party members within 15 yards, deal with Azerite essences by 45% and their speed by 280 for the next 20 seconds. So it's almost like a bloodlust. The minor power is called Unified Strength, where your spells and abilities have a chance to increase you and 2 other allies' haste by a certain amount and reduce the cooldown of you and I guess those 2 same allies' currently slotted major essence by 1 second. So this almost feels like a support essence. So if I click, that didn't look very exciting, he just kind of went... Anyway, so here I have this moment of glory. So damage dealt by Azerite essences is increased by 40... Okay, so it's damage dealt by Azerite essences increased by 45%. That's very, very interesting, because as long as one person has this, this will increase certain burst moments for your raid or for your Mythic Plus team or for your PvP team by a massive amount. Imagine a bunch of people teaming up and using their Essence of the Focusing Iris all at once. Imagine the tanks joining in because they're using that other, or imagine anyone being able to join in for that by using that one essence that lets them steal other people's essences. And this has a 1-minute cooldown, which gives it a lot of flexibility if you wanted to, let's say, chain multiple burst moments. So if you want to have a bunch of people use essences here and a bunch of people use essences there, then you'll just need to have multiple people with this particular essence, and you'll be able to get that much more throughput out. Unified Strength seems to be an okay passive, although when it comes to coordinating, then I would say it's not as reliable, because it will cause the cooldowns to be thrown off by a little bit. Timing will change, and even then I'm pretty sure that whenever this happens to proc, it's not going to be... chances are going to be pretty good that the right people that you really want to have their cooldowns to be reduced, it's probably not going to be them. And finally, let's move on to Breath of the Undying. This has only 45-second cooldown, where you burn your target with a bolt of Azerite, dealing damage, and if the target has less than 20% health or more than 80% health, the cooldown is reduced by 30 seconds, which makes it a 15-second cooldown. If Reaping Flames kills an enemy, its cooldown is reset and will deal 100% increased damage on its next use. And for the minor power, Lethal Strikes. Your spells and abilities have a chance to strike your targets for a decent amount of fire damage and heal you for 50% of the damage dealt. If your target is below 20% health, the chance for extra damage is increased by 400%. This is a really interesting essence. I mean, this is definitely not... Well, actually, I would say that this is a great all-around essence. If you're doing a big raid fight, it means that your initial damage is going to start out really high, and you're going to have a nice little execute phase because you'll be able to use this ability every 15 seconds or so. Having the Reaping Flames possibly like reset the cooldown on it, it's nice, but it's already fast enough that I don't think it needs to be that much of a worry. I want to make it clear that I'm not a very experienced DPSer at all, but I do have a feeling that a 45-second cooldown that could possibly be dropped down to 15 seconds, I have a feeling that that would sort of mess with rotational abilities or otherwise your typical routine just a little bit. Having to weave this new button in here when you might have other buttons that you typically want to use, this may potentially muck things up. As for the minor power, a little bit more passive damage doesn't hurt anybody, although I am a little curious about the chance for extra damage being increased by 400% because it's the chance for extra damage. I think that it doesn't need to go any higher than 100%, so maybe it's something else. And how does this look? No animations yet. Okay. Great. I mean, it's not bad. I would say that this could probably just replace the Crucible of Flame, because this just has... I think this just has a cooler effect to it. So that pretty much wraps up everything that there is to the new essences that are coming in 8.3. As for my overall thoughts, I'm still kind of iffy about getting a cool new ability or a cool new feature like this, knowing that it's only going to extend throughout the life of this particular patch. And chances are that these are going to go away as soon as we hop into the new expansion, or probably as soon as the pre-patch comes. So enjoy it while it lasts, I suppose. Of course, we could always be surprised by Blizzard. For all we know, this sort of system may follow us through to future expansions and forever. But I'm not going to count on it so far. At the moment, I'm just going to kind of leave my expectations to be grounded and expect that, hey, you know, let's try to have fun with these while we can. But I'd love to know what you folks think about these essences so far. Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Otherwise, if you enjoyed yourself, like the video and subscribe for more of this and all things Warcraft. I'll see you next time. Until then, stay safe, stay happy, and stay breezy.